Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners?
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is approval of the minutes of June 15, 2020. They have been distributed. They are pages 2 through 5 in your packet.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Jurdovic moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of June 15, 2020 as distributed. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order is item D, building permits. The building permit report has been distributed and is in the packet. Is there any discussion, any concerns, any questions?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the building permit report as distributed. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next order on the agenda is the consent agenda, and it is items A through F.
There's no questions. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as distributed for the Monday, July 6th meeting. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda. First item number 1 is a public hearing for the rezoning of Sand Hills 4th Edition, a replat, and rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. Ordinance 1159. Lisa Senke.
Thank you, Your Honor and Commissioners. This request is twofold. There's a public hearing and first reading on the rezoning, as well as final plat approval for Sand Hills 4th Edition. It's a little unorthodox to have final plat approval along with the first reading and public hearing. However, we're trying to accommodate a closing. There will be a second reading on the rezoning at the next meeting. This application was received in order to allow lot line adjustments for continued light industrial development. When Sand Hills 3rd was platted and zoned, Lot 21 was not included, as the previous property owner was located in Canada. The parcel remained agricultural. City Vision has since purchased the lot. The rezoning is necessary for future construction of light industrial facilities. Notices were sent to property owners within 150 feet, applicable agencies and departments, and no concerns were noted. It is recommended that the city approve the proposed application on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with recommended conditions of approval as follows. An updated drainage plan is approved by the city engineer. An updated attorney title opinion to the city of West Fargo is received. A signed plat is received with any necessary easements, and a certificate is shown that taxes are current. Again, this is a public hearing, and we are also requesting final plat approval.
Any questions from the commissioners for Ms. Sankey? All right, at this time, we'll move out of the regular agenda and move into the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Again, the rezoning of the Sand Hills 4th Edition, a replat and rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item? Is there anyone who would like to speak to this item? Having no speakers come forward, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, are there any other discussion points that you'd like to make from Ms. Sankey?
I'll make a motion to approve with the 4 recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Been moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve with the items listed by planning and zoning. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 2 is a request to purchase approximately 2.9 acres of a city-owned parcel at Lot 3, Block 1, Copang. Mr. Simon and Mrs. Whitney Irish. Thank you, dear.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Whitney Irish, as you stated. My husband and I are seeking to get the city's approval to purchase a portion of a city-owned lot. We currently have a purchase agreement with Century Builders to purchase a residential lot located at 3120 Cheyenne River Way. The residential lot is highlighted there in the blue. The purchase agreement, though, is contingent upon us being able to purchase a portion of the city-owned lot that is to the west in the backyard of the residential lot. You can see it highlighted there in the blue. We are currently about 16 days into this 60-day contingency of the purchase agreement. We are seeking to purchase part of the city-owned lot so that we would be able to extend the lot line to the river, extend the boulevard landscaping for the development, which is called Stonewood, and to extend the residential lot fence all the way to the back of the lot. So there you can see the proposed section that we are seeking to acquire, and then we would landscape that and include it as part of the residential lot and to merge the two into one larger lot. The city-owned lot, which I'll go back here, is 0.55 acres, roughly 23,763 square feet. The portion that we would look to acquire is approximately 0.29 acres or 12,615 square feet. The exact size would be determined once the survey has been done, which we would do at our expense. The tax assessed value for the entire lot is roughly $24,500, so roughly $1.03 per square foot. The special assessments to the entire parcel right now are approximately $1,751. There is a street view of the city-owned parcel, and that is mostly of what we would be looking to merge with the existing residential lot. Once merged, we would hope that this would be what it would look like. So the fence line along 32nd would be extended. The back portion of the city-acquired parcel would be landscaped with trees to provide some visual privacy from the intersection of 32nd and Cheyenne and some of the new development that's going on out there. There was a billboard put up, and you can see it from what would be the backyard, so being able to extend that and put some trees up would provide a visual screen from the intersection and some of the development. At closing, we would seek to prorate the specials and taxes and then obviously pay those going forward from the date of closing. As far as how the sale would go forward, we would request a private sale for a few reasons. One is the contingency timeline that we personally are up against. Second would be the fact that we think it would be a lower cost to the city because you would avoid having to publish and the time for having to come back and take bids and that process. The city ordinance allows for a private sale as well as the North Dakota Century Code, and I've copied those statutes and ordinances into your materials. We also think that this city-owned parcel is likely of any interest to anyone other than the owner of that residential lot because the 0.29 acres that we would be looking to acquire would be landlocked if it was sold off separately, because it would be blocked by the boulevard on the street. And I'll go back here so you can see. So it would be landlocked to be accessed from 32nd, because the city would retain their ownership of some of the Riverworks portions, and then you would not be able to access it, obviously, through the existing residential lot, and it would be too small, too close to the river, and too close to the existing residential lot for anyone to use it for any sort of building of a structure or any sort of industrial use. There's the West Fargo City Ordinance. I won't bore you with reading all of that, but it does allow for a private sale. And so we are looking to buy or acquire the 0.29 acres of the city-owned parcel. Again, the exact size to be determined based on a survey, and with your deference, which obviously you'd be willing to sell if we'd like to extend the lot line and extend the landscaping. We think this would obviously add an increase in yearly tax and special assessment income to the city. It would reduce the city's need to maintain that portion that we would acquire, and it would improve the overall appearance as you drive along 32nd towards Cheyenne and that part of the river. We moved from Fargo to Shadowwood in West Fargo in about 2012, and we just love the area that we live in. We love seeing all the growth, and there's a wellness center, there's grocery stores, there's tons of new restaurants and shops coming up, and we're just excited about the future growth and development in the area. After having 2 children, our needs in a home definitely changed. So when we were looking at our options, whether to build or buy, we knew we wanted to stay as close to our area as we can. So we came across this lot, and we just want to make sure it's the best that we can for our future home. So we look forward to hopefully making this dream a reality with your help and cooperation on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Commissioners, questions for the lady?
I have a question for Dustin, I guess.
Yes, Commissioner Jurdevig.
2 questions. The first one, what's the value, Dustin, as it relates to, access to that box culvert? Or, I mean, is there any reason why we need the footprint that the city has today?
Sure. Good question. Good evening, Commissioners, and thanks for the question, Commissioner Jurdevig. So this is a unique piece of property, and I'll let Tina or John answer as to how we came about acquiring this property, but what you can kind of see in the map that's on the screen right now is a driveway going to a structure. It's an outfall structure. We have 2 60-inch diameter force mains discharging into the river at this location. We also have, of course, the box culvert that is just to the west of that discharge point. So we have some city infrastructure in this parcel, as well as there is a groomed area, a gravel lot, if you will, for public access that was meant to provide a parking area for those that want to come over here and fish. In my professional opinion, that is a relatively unsafe location for public access. We have some unique infrastructure here. It's a little different than the location that's to the north, kind of by the gas station up there, where the diversion is coming in together with the river. There is a flat spot where, again, public come down and fish in that location. We don't have any infrastructure there. It's not the same. So that's a little more safe, whereas this does present a little bit of a safety concern for me.
You actually answered my second question, which was kind of along the lines of fishing and whether or not we wanted people to be doing that there. So.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you, President Dartis. I'm sure John will get into the discussion on how we legally can transfer property or not transfer property and what we need to do, and I'll let him talk on that. I just wanted to give you some idea of how, just a general overview of how we got the property. Back when we were the city was putting in a box culvert under 32nd Avenue. There was a property there, it was a co-paying house. and that house had to be acquired at some time after the project. I'm not exactly sure if it was due to erosion issues or if the city purchased it because of the spacing. John would know that. But I wanted you to know we checked today, and what the city paid for that property at the time was $95,000. And the project was paid for with city sales tax. So I'll let John talk on that.
Yeah, and I can give a little bit of history. Years ago, that was a metal bridge crossing there, and as part of a large project, the city pulled the bridge out, hired a contractor to put the box culverts in. To be quite frank, the project didn't go according to plan. There was several stability issues, and the bank collapsed. The home that was located there was owned by an older gentleman named Kopang. We ended up purchasing that house. We didn't have to use eminent domain. We did use eminent domain in a couple parcels in that area to acquire some of that land because of what happened. We needed so when the bank collapsed, the engineers and the contractor said we need more space to work on excavation, and so we had to go out and acquire a larger property area for the project limits. So we went and acquired that area. My understanding from the engineers at that time was there was stability problems due to the water coming out of the culverts, and so it made sense to acquire the property and overall because of stability problems. And the purchase price was quite significant for that parcel because that was, I think, 2008 or 9 when I worked on acquiring that. If you wanted to go forward with the sale, private sale is permitted, but you do need to retain a real estate agent. So if you wanted to go forward with it, we'd prepare a resolution for next commission meeting. We'd engage a real estate agent, charge their normal 3 or 6%, whatever they charge, and then they would go ahead and negotiate. The idea is when you sell land that's owned by the public, you either do it through a public sale or through a real estate agent. The idea is to prevent, transparency and to make sure that you're getting the best deal possible as a public. And
not to interrupt, but my husband is a real estate broker, and he would obviously represent us if we were the buyer, and so he would waive typically a real estate commission, and jump in if I'm wrong, but typically a real estate commission is 6%. He would waive the 3% on the buyer side, and then we would cover the 3% on the seller side.
John, though, we don't, I'm sorry, I'll just say, we don't, that's negotiable, that rate. Not with you folks, that's fine. Yep. But with the other, that's very negotiable. We don't need to pay that much, I can tell you that. So.
And we would just, over the next 2 weeks, if the commission wants to do that, staff would just retain a real estate agent. It just gives that arm's length negotiation. So if anybody questions you as a commission as well, you gave somebody a really good deal, you can say, no, we're represented by a real estate agent who is negotiating on our behalf. That's kind of the history of the parcel. I do know that, and this is a question for Dustin about our setback line, but there is a lot of bank stability issues there, and so I don't know if that's covered under a current plat, that area, but you can't really build anything in that area.
Commissioners, if I may, to touch on that a little further, when this development was platted, we did include a setback, and I can't recall if it's exactly by ordinance, it's 100 feet from the established riverbank. I think for this development, we went a little further than that, a little above and beyond, and there is a requirement to establish a secondary river bank. It's kind of like a levee. It's not a certified levee, but it provides that additional protection that should there be any erosion and slumping, there's a secondary bank established to keep the river contained. And so it's at least 100 feet, but I think in this area it's actually a little greater than that. I'd have to pull up the plat to confirm.
Has that been communicated to the Irishes?
It's visible when you go out there, because if you look at the image there, you can see where the fence kind of cuts into the north. That is actually raised up probably about 7 to 10 feet or so. And so our plan, if we were able to do so, we would basically extend the lot line and the fence back as far west and then rebuild that up to basically just move that levee, if you will.
Mr. Scott?
certainly not an area where we would want, permanent structures.
No.
And I don't think they're planning on that. But again, I guess, if you ask Public Works and Engineering, I think we would be completely fine not having this space. I think it gets to be more of the other issue of the fact that how we acquired it, how much we paid to acquire it, and then just the process of going through a sale. Back to Commissioner Jurdovic's question on the public use of this. It's been utilized in this capacity for about 10 years now, I think. We put that gravel lot in 2011. So there might be an expectation from the public to maintain that, but like I said earlier, this is not a safe place for that type of activity. I would prefer, honestly, to convert it to a private use that is controlled and fenced. But we would have to establish exactly how much room we need for the future. So how much of this can we sell off, we would still have to determine.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
I have one question.
Mr. Simmons?
Whitney, you talked about, assuming the proportionate share of the property taxes, and obviously closing, that's when you do that. But I don't know that you do that with assessments. Are you planning on paying the assessments off?
We likely would just pay them off for the acquired parcel because it's around $1,700.
Right, because those, you can't appropriate those. I mean, they have to be paid off at the sale, so.
Correct, but then any specials added in the future, those would obviously be added to our portion.
Which is about, it just looked like it's $1,700 or something. I'm just saying that would be added to your sale, whatever the property's selling for, 24,000, whatever it is.
Right, so the 1,700 is for the full half acre. So
right,
depending on,
okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure you're willing to pay the assessments off.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Jurdovic?
Just one more clarification, Dustin, we're okay with them moving that secondary levy? Because that's what I heard said. Just want to make sure that that's...
We would certainly need to confirm where it's being located to, and if it's going to be within that 100-foot setback, that's going to require a geotechnical analysis and report done by a registered engineer. So if they're proposing to relocate that levee, say, within 90 feet of that riverbank, that would not be allowed. We would have to deny that.
And our plans are essentially just to obviously landscape it. We have no plans to build any structure other than a fence would be the extent of that. We would plant some trees, but all of that would, we're going to be building a home there potentially, so we want it to be as safe and structurally sound as possible. So our goal would be to work with whomever in engineering to get that figured out so that it's done correctly and the best that it can be.
Absolutely. Yep, and that's where, again, that levee would play into that work. I don't recall the exact dimension, but it is important to keep it off the riverbank far enough away so that as erosion continues over time, we still have that protection from flooding.
So if we were to, Mayor, approve this tonight, obviously we'd have to put some contingencies in here. And do we know what the contingencies are?
What I would suggest is if the commission is okay with moving forward, you just authorize me to prepare a resolution and bring that back to the commission in 2 weeks, and then we can retain a real estate agent, and then you just have the real estate agent would negotiate on behalf of the city. And I'll just, I think it's important to have that transparency because of the way we acquired the property. It wasn't, when that project did not go well for the homeowners around that area. And I don't know if anybody is still left from that, but having some transparency and having that arm's length negotiation, I think, is really important because we had to acquire some property through eminent domain, and it wasn't necessarily a good situation for all those involved.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Anyone else?
Quick comment.
George?
So I just want to say I think it's exciting that you're interested in this property. Obviously the city paid more, but nobody else is going to be interested in this. It sounds like the city doesn't want it. So for you to come in and want to purchase a portion of it, I think it's fantastic for the city to be able to recoup some of those funds, recoup some of that money towards special assessment. So I think it's fantastic. It seems like you guys are willing to do everything that the city wants. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And the third party will determine, working with the city, the cost of the valuation of this. Is that correct?
Well, your real estate agent would negotiate with buyers for the closing costs, the purchase price. Essentially, you're retaining a real estate agent to negotiate with them and bring back the best deal they can to the city commission. So you wouldn't decide what the price is tonight. It could very well be that the real estate agent is able to negotiate a higher price than what's being offered tonight. And so we just prepare the resolution, we'd get the real estate agent engaged right away, and then maybe the real estate agent could actually start having some negotiations ahead of the resolution, so we have some numbers. But
To your point of transparency, though, does it come back to the city commission for final approval?
it does.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisk?
President Dartis, I just wanted to clarify the value that's set on that lot right now. The $1 per square foot is a flat rate that the assessing department uses on exempt lots that are odd shaped. So it's just a basic flat rate. It's not based on the valuation of land around it. And I felt that was important to clarify that.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Any additional questions from Mrs. Irish? All right. What's your pleasure?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. George. Is there a second, please?
What are we approving actually?
Could it,
Because I don't know that we need a motion to approve anything, do we? We're just gonna give you permission to move forward?
Yeah, you could, if you want to do a motion tonight, you could have a motion to direct the city attorney to prepare the resolution and city staff to engage a real estate agent.
We'll make that the
I
motion.
would second that then.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Shockley. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business. Thank you, Mrs. Irish. Next order of business is item number 3 is the North Dakota State College of Science Career Academy, Workforce Academy. Dr. Richmond and Tony Grinberg presenting. Dr. Richmond, welcome this evening.
Thank you. For your record, my name is John Richmond, and tonight I'm representing a consortium of school districts and NDSCS in a plan to create a career academy for Cass County. The makeup of that consortium consists of school representatives from Northern Cass, Central Cass, West Fargo, and Fargo, as well as Cass County Career and Technical Education Program under the direction of Dr. Denise Jonas, who is in the audience tonight, as well as North Dakota State College of Science, where I serve as the president, but also under the leadership of our Vice President of Workforce, Tony Grinberg, who is also in the audience tonight. So I'm going to speak briefly. I know you have material on this, but to highlight that material, the academy concept is a concept where we are going to create greater opportunities for students. Those students range from the age of kindergarten through an associate degree, or number-wise K through 14. Creating career awareness opportunities for elementary students, creating career exploration opportunities for junior high students, providing them hands-on projects where they can learn about career and technical education and viable careers that exist in our community today. The academy concept continues on into the high school, where we are creating curriculum that is seamless from 10th grade through an associate degree, aligning our curriculum and aligning our resources. None of the 5 of the entities, educational entities, could do what we're doing alone. By working collaboratively and being innovative in our approach, we can make this a proven solution to help the workforce issue. I'm not going to speak to the workforce issue. You all know the numbers. North Dakota's greatest population has the worst workforce issue, but yet no major solutions. This is a proven model across the country that will help. It's not going to solve it, but it will help it. The innovation piece of our academy, or our concept, is really moving more towards a workforce development center. Because as you look across the country, most academies stop at the 12th grade. Ours won't. Ours will continue through the associate degree. But it goes even beyond that. We know that there are adults that need to be retrained or upskilled. We know there are unemployed people. So that customized training, that workforce incumbent that needs training, your companies that have employees that need training. That is also a possibility with this academy. The next component, it continues with the innovation, the New American program, a program we've been running here in Fargo, West Fargo, for 18, 20 years. That will continue in this center, in the academy. The other innovative piece of this is the private sector. We're not doing this alone. We knew we couldn't do it alone. We went to the private sector businesses in your community and other communities in Cass County to ask for their assistance, for their understanding and their obligation to this. We have over $11 million in pledges towards this project, contributed by private sector companies right here in our community. The innovation piece really gets from the private sector. When we've asked for their pledges, I've told them I want a long-term pledge. It's not just your money. You can give me money and we can build a building and that would help, but it's not going to really be the big help. The big help is when we have private sector helping us, K through 14, develop the curriculum, train their current employees to upskill them as they need to. That's where the real innovation comes from this. Greater student opportunity, collaboration, working together. Think of how expensive it is to run any CTE program, the extensive equipment and technology that's needed. 5, 6 different types of populations can utilize the same shop and lab over and over again in a scheduling component. We're here today to ask and request $1.25 million over 5 years. So why ask today? We've learned the federal government has increased the EDA grant, the EDA Economic Development Association. They've increased their funding significantly. Our regional office here is in Denver. We believe we have a great opportunity to submit a grant for $5 million. But that grant requires matches, private match, public match. And today, your commitment to this project would be a portion of that public commitment. Earlier today, we learned the Cass County Commission approved $5 million towards this project. And we're optimistic and hopeful that you see the benefit as they did and as we do as a consortium of educational entities. And with that, President Dartis, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. Commissioners, questions for Dr. Richmond? Commissioner Jurdevig.
So, I'm a big fan of the Career Workforce Academy, and I want to see this move forward. But I guess I will just be really blunt. I have a math problem, and that is why West Fargo property taxpayers are being asked to pay significantly more per capita than anybody else in the county. Can that be explained in a way that makes it make sense?
I don't know that I can. The other public entities are, as I said, the county at $5 million. Fargo, and a request will go forward to the Fueling the Future campaign on Wednesday. We needed to come up with that match in order to apply to the federal grant.
And just to further explain my question, asking Fargo for $1.5 million, with a population of approximately 130,000, and asking the city of West Fargo for $1.25 million with a population of maybe 40,000, and I would just roughly say that it should be a 3-to-1 type of ask, because our school districts might be the same, but our city entities are not. And so it makes sense to me the school districts are contributing in a similar fashion between Fargo and West Fargo. But to expect the West Fargo taxpayer to pay such a significant premium over Fargo or any of the other cities around us that are not directly contributing outside of their involvement with the county doesn't seem to be the right thing as a West Fargo taxpayer. But I want to see it move forward, so I'm kind of stuck with an issue that I'm not quite sure how to solve.
Mayor,
Simmons?
I'll just add to that. The discrepancy part with the math is absolutely right, but not only that, you're getting from the county, that's our tax dollars. You're getting from West Fargo schools, That's our tax dollars, and now you want from us again, you're gonna request from fueling our future, correct, Doctor? That's our tax dollars. We gave them money. It's like we're being 4 times, charged for the same process. I don't know how we can justify, especially with our, quite honestly, right now, Tina, I believe I heard that our COLAs are gonna maybe be cut for our employees. Our mill levy's gonna go up. We got a huge infrastructure. Again, I support this Workforce Academy. It's just the wrong time. I realize you're getting a grant, but we've got a lot of bills, folks, in this city, and downtown infrastructure is huge for us, Doctor. I mean, I don't know how we can afford this, quite honestly.
Before my esteemed colleague, the grant opportunity closes in July,
I realize that.
and that's $5 million that's at stake. We're all gonna have to make compromises and tough decisions. I've talked about the educational component of this, but truly when you run the numbers, this is an economic boost. This will drive the economy of our community upwards. Greater employment, higher skilled employees earning greater wages. All of those tax entities that you mentioned are true. They are there because everyone had to make a contribution in order for us to submit the grant in July to be able to garnish $5 million from the federal government. Tony?
For the record, President Dardis and Commission, Tony Grenberg, I'd like to go back and talk about the match and the level of commitment we're asking from West Fargo as compared to the City of Fargo. And I know that there's been some recent communication that Fargo is willing to step up and cover a lot of the upfront infrastructure costs, deferred specials, et cetera, that will be all penciled out once this thing moves forward, and that's around $8 million. And so I know that has to be validated, and there's some questions around that, but that's just a point I think it's important to reinforce. That was knowledge that came Friday, because your concerns were echoed back to the offices of the City of Fargo. And if I may come back to Commissioner Simmons as well, there really was there's some method to the magic here, if you will, that, if you look back to a year ago when the Chamber and EDC requested that the county provide 50% of the public funds for this project. And that really was predicated because the legislature didn't fund Governor Burgum's program. And a year ago, the county commission committed a mill, yet with a lot of questions. And so starting late last fall and into, I call it pre-COVID, January and February, the executive committee of the Career Academy, including the superintendents, Dr. Jonas, Dr. Richmond, and I, welcome Ken Pollock and Chad Peterson. And it really came down to, often how are we going to be able to afford this at the county level? $15 million is a heavy lift when you look at the history of the county. COVID hit. And then, as Dr. Richmond mentioned, the U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA, Economic Development Association, received $80 million of new money for grants for projects like this. And we began having conversations about could we leverage the federal grant and lighten the load for the county to make this project a reality with bringing federal funds in to get the project going. And a number of the pledges from the private company said, you got to figure this out, because if the $5 or $10 million doesn't come to Cass County, it's going to go somewhere else. So take advantage of this now. So really it settled in on the chair of the county commission saying, I think I can sell $5 million. That's it. And then he looked to the mayors of both communities, what can you do? And when we looked at the match required of $20.2 million on top of the $5 million federal grant request, that's how we got here, from a number standpoint. And so, I really get the difference in population, but I think you got to look. It's important to understand how we got here. And the opportunity is to make this project as part of what we're talking about.
Commissioner Jurdovic and then Commissioner George.
If I can speak to the $8 million, which is what, from my understanding, it's actually the $7.9 million that would be coming from sales tax to fund the development of a mile of 45th Street and then a mile of 64th Avenue south. That development and that investment of sales tax is going to spur a tremendous amount of real estate development along those 2 miles of major roadways. So I'm not sure I can equate that $8 million investment of sales tax, which I'd like to point out West Fargo residents contribute some to that too, every time we shop in Fargo, and the huge amount of positive revenue that's going to come from that. That to me does not justify the property tax expense on a per capita basis between our two cities to have to cover this commitment. It really, why should a West Fargo taxpayer, when they pay their property taxes, be paying 3 times the equivalency of what will be coming for the same house in Fargo, for the same benefit? It really just, I really struggle with that. The ask to Fargo needs to be higher, or the ask to West Fargo needs to be less.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Commissioner George.
I was actually going to say almost the exact same thing as far as the $8,000 towards infrastructure. That's going to benefit Fargo, not West Fargo. And I think if this was going to go in West Fargo, I might look at this a little differently as far as paying more per capita. But I feel exactly the same way as you guys do. I want this to happen, but I don't think we can ask this much money from the taxpayers of West Fargo. And I hate to say that, but I agree with everything you guys are saying.
I mean, one idea would be to, approve a dollar amount contingent upon Fargo's being something different than what is being presented here.
I would agree with that. I think the other thing too is, I know you've got nearly $12,000 or $12 million pledged from private entities, and I'd like to see more of it coming from private entities. I mean, if it's it's the public that or the private businesses that need these workers, maybe they should be funding more of it.
I can assure you that the man standing to my left and I will continue to make calls with the private sector. That's still part of our goal, is to get to the 15. And keep in mind, this $25 million with 5 from the feds would be phase 1. We still have $5 more million to raise to finish out the project. So that's where that would come from. And, this COVID situation right now isn't the most lucrative time to be knocking on doors asking for, donations. But you're spot on.
Are there additional questions, Commissioners?
They've taken my thunder, so.
I'm a big supporter of the Workforce Academy, and I have been for many years. I've stood beside these two gentlemen out in front of the State Board of Higher Education. I've stood beside these two gentlemen on the ask to the public. I've stood beside them when we were asking the legislature to reconsider some of their positions on this. Many times when we have a discussion about this, and it gets to be about whether or not we're funding schools. And that goes to Commissioner Jurdovic's great points, and his mathematics is spot on. There could be no debate with that. But the reality of this is not about an educational incentive. It's the answer to a workforce problem that our state has experienced for a very, very long time. There's other entities that have now stepped up. The Home Builders Association, for example, and some of their membership, what they've done for services in kind or whatever to support this has been amazing. We have an engineering firm within our own community that has stepped up immensely because their surveyors and those people that they hire come from these programs. So I too am very concerned about our budget. We got that this evening from Mr. Larson and Mrs. Fisk. But this is about an investment, whether it's in our communities as a whole. As we've said, it's Castleton, it's Cass Valley North, it's Fargo, it's West Fargo. It's a joint venture. So, Commissioner Jurdovic, I like your idea that if you believe that it's contingent upon some of these other elements, then I'd ask all of the commissioners to reevaluate that. For many, many years, prior to me running for election, West Fargo was never invited to the table, to sit at the adult table. Thanks to commissioners like I have sitting up here with me, and great commissioners that came before us, and great staff, and great advisors, I think it's a real compliment that West Fargo was asked to be a part of this at this level, because before, we were ignored. So,
I do have
You'll make the right judgments. I'll look for your leads and your follows, and I'd call on Commissioner Olson for the next part.
I just have a question. If we were to pledge any money, where would it come from? Where would the financing come from? What funds?
Commissioner Olson, that is, it's a very good question. Typically, I would say for this type of venture, it would be, of course, it's always up to the commission, but it would probably be out of economic development sales tax, again, as in fueling our future, because that's the point of it. Of course, you can utilize general fund money, reserve fund money, but again, that's a commission decision. That's not a staff decision.
Thank you.
Commissioners, additional questions or comments? Dr. Richmond or Mr. Grinberg, you have anything else for us?
President Ardis, no, we don't. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir.
My only comment, Mayor, would be is that, I think we all support this. I really do. I just don't think right now the funding is there. I'm not going to see our employees suffer through this. I'm not going to see our citizens suffer with an increase. And Commissioner Jordan, I understand what you're saying, but for your Commissioner George, we went through this about a year ago, and we did the same type of deal, and the commitment wasn't there. We did this with Fueling Our Future. We said we'll give so much. That fell apart. So I don't necessarily, agree that would work. I just think, I agree if there's a way to get it lower, but I don't think we should be making any votes like that tonight. I think we should, if they want to come back with a different program or something, that's fine. Otherwise, my vote will be no tonight. So,
Commissioner Simmons, could you clarify your point of Fueling the Future fell apart?
Well, in reference to, we had committed, and I think, Mayor, you were the one actually, was it not you, that said they were going to double our commitment? We did 400,000. I was under the assumption they were going to do 800, and they did not do that.
You're referring to the city of Fargo.
Correct. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And no fault of yours. I'm not saying that.
Thank you. That's why I wanted to clarify.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes.
Is there any further discussion on the issue before us this evening? Item number 3. No action?
I'll make a motion. I'm not sure there's going to be
Great, Commissioner Jordan.
second. I would throw out there that I would make a motion to approve an expenditure of, trying to do some quick math in my head and it's not working very well. Something more in line of maybe $800,000 over 5 years, and Fargo commits to the combined difference of what that would be. So, shy of $2 million.
It's another
which
700.
Still, proportionately, I would say West Fargo taxpayers, even at that, are still paying more per capita, but at least we can try to move it forward to give it a chance and with the Fargo City Commission next week before the deadline.
Is there a second?
I'd second that one.
Thank you, Commissioner George. It's been moved and seconded that a commitment this evening for $800,000 with the contingencies that Commissioner Jerdevig outlined. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, I'd just like a roll call, please.
Very good. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. It will be a roll call vote. Commissioner George?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dardis? Yes. Commissioner Simmons?
No.
Commissioner Jerdevig?
Yes.
The motion passes. Next order of business is item number 4, Melissa Richard, 2020 Census Update.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having me up today to give a brief update on the 2020 census. It's still going on. COVID has changed the timeline significantly, and so we have lots more opportunity to continue to talk about the census. I'm going to start with some important dates just to kind of get your mindset and the point that we are in the census, and obviously, as I said, the timeline has changed So the self-response rate is, started March 12th, and it's been extended all the way through October 31st. Typically, we see it ending around August 1st, I think is what we learned. Sorry, Wendy is my complete count committee cohort here, so she's going to confirm some stuff for me as I go. And because of COVID, it's been extended. The field offices that normally would have been out there door knocking, following up on addresses that haven't responded were closed. They have reopened in our state, and we will see in North Dakota non-response follow-up starting August 11th. So August 11th, we'll start to see census workers going door to those who haven't responded and asking them to fill the census out there, providing the census for them to take and fill out at their leisure and sending it back in. That will last through October 31st. Wouldn't it be cute if they were in costumes walking around on Halloween? No, that's just me. Okay. There'll be a really important count of people experiencing homelessness outdoors September 22nd through the 24th. That typically happens at the end of March. That's an extremely important count. There's a population out there that needs services and support, and as Commissioner Simmons loves to remind us all, there's a lot of funding that comes in through the census, and so making sure that population is accurately counted is really important. So we're lucky that that got extended into September. Typically by January 1st, we get those numbers and we know what the story is. They're presented to the president, and then it gets bumped back to the states for the official numbers. That will be happening July 31st of 2021. So that gives you a little insight into how COVID has really interrupted that timeline. To give you an update of where West Fargo is right now, our response rate right now is at 76.2%. Our total response rate for the 2010 census was 79.1. So we have a few more months to go, and we're 3% behind last time. I feel confident that we're going to break that, and obviously we're hoping for a 100% count like our friends in North River achieved in like the first 2 weeks of the census, which was really impressive. Our top responding neighborhood is the Charleswood area. This map shows census tracts that include sections of West Fargo. It's not the city of West Fargo boundaries completely, but you see the darkest color, the darker the color, the higher the response rate. And so right tucked in here is Charleswood, and they're at 86.1%. So that's really impressive. We're very thankful to them, hoping we can get the rest of the community responding. This section right here is at which includes the Rivers Bend neighborhoods, the Preserve area. I think those are the two main ones there, is at 67.0%. So that's a neighborhood that we can target and encourage to respond. Happens to be my neighborhood, so maybe I'll do some part-time door knocking myself. And because we love to see how successful we are compared to our neighbors, I also added up there. Fargo's current response rate is 64.1%, so good job, West Fargo. Cass County is at 67.2%. North Dakota as a state is 61.6%. That's not surprising. We've got a lot of rural areas, a lot of P.O. boxes, just hard to count areas that it's really important that those field offices are back in operation so they can start to do that outreach and get out to those areas. And the national response rate is at 61.9%. So in terms of next steps, we've been running some updated social media messaging in the last few weeks, and we'll be looking at connecting with the Complete Count Committee to enact some of the plans we had for those specialized hard-to-count populations like the New Americans, the younger families who maybe haven't gone through the process of filling the census out before and aren't familiar with it. I did want to publicly state, too, that the American Community Survey is going on right now. That is a segment of the Census Bureau. It's a different survey than the census survey, so some people who have filled out the census are getting a call, and the questions are much more in-depth. They talk about what your job is, what your salary is, asked really specific questions about your lifestyle. It is a legitimate survey that the Census Bureau does do. It samples a different, smaller population, but some people are getting calls on that. So, and we've received calls from people checking to make sure that that is actually going on, and we've been able to confirm it is. So if anyone gets that call, I just want them to know that that's legitimate. Any questions?
Just a clarification.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Olson.
Based on the response rate, you've come to that based on how many surveys were sent out and versus how many have been returned, right?
No.
No?
No. They have an estimate of what our population is based on a number of factors: addresses, birth, death certificates. The planning and zoning with GIS goes through and helps do a lot of mapping to get our new addresses online, which I'm sure was a big pain in this year, because the last time was 2010, and we've added quite a few addresses since then. And so they have a good estimate of how much population we have right now, and then they base that off of how many surveys have been completed.
Okay.
But there's very few actual paper surveys that get sent out, yes, or that they would track. And this is the first year it's online, which I think has been great, especially with the timing of what we've gone through in the last spring and summer. So they have a general idea, and then they track against that.
Thank you.
I'm pretty hopeful we're going to see us go over 40,000 officially with this census. Absolutely. I'm looking to anyone to confirm, but John's like, what do I know?
Any questions for Ms. Richards? Thank you for the nice job. Thank you to you and your committee. A perfect example is of what we're experiencing right now across our country with COVID-19, and having a census at the same time is so critically important because of the federal funds that are available, whether it's from supporting businesses, supporting payroll, reimbursement for dealing with the COVID, from our fire department, from our police department. It is all tied to population, and this is an opportunity for us. Again, West Fargo, we're leading the state of North Dakota with our response rate. And for those of you watching us on TV this evening, if you've not done it, my fellow commissioners and I would appeal to you to please do that. Anybody that's in the room this evening that has neglected to do so, please do so. Melissa, could you remind me, please, of what the residency, isn't it 30 days if you've lived within?
It's based on the best way to figure out where you live, if you happen to have a few places you travel in between, is where do you spend the bulk of your time, more than 50% of your time. And then from there, you can do 30%, 30 days. There's also April 1st is considered Census Day, and that's a day that they really push for you to just, if you just don't know, count where you are that day. But really it's about where you spend the bulk of your time, because that's where you use the bulk of your services that the funds are distributed to help cover.
All right. So thank you to the community of West Fargo for the great job that you've done, and for those of you that are listening, please follow through and fill out your census. Thank you very much. Next order of business is item number 5, Melissa Richard, a proposal for community inclusion.
Thank you. Just to level set what I'll be presenting tonight, I am not asking for approval on anything. I'm asking for feedback so that we can come back and provide a good proposal to the commission. If you feel like there's a need for a vote, we can certainly do that, but I really just want to set the stage that this is just meant for feedback and to provide you with an overview of where we're at. I'll also let you know it's pretty high level because there's a lot of things that we don't know. When we take a look at a community inclusion action plan, we're really talking about assessing what's actually going on and then building a plan from there, and so there's a lot of work that has to go into that. So the topics that I want to cover today is just what this plan is, or what a plan like this could be, what are the benefits of it, who will help us build it, what will guide the plan, and then what the next steps are. So a community inclusion action plan is the set of words I'm using right now. That might change. Again, this is a flexible proposal that we're trying to work on to provide you with the best case scenario to take a look at and approve. It's meant to be a roadmap to guide diversity and inclusion initiatives for the community. When we use the word diversity, we're referring to all aspects of human differences, social identities, and social group differences. There's some easily identifiable ones that we all work on: age, gender, race, all the way to disabilities, seen or not seen, and things like that. So there's all different ways that people get categorized, and diversity just refers to the collection of that. Inclusion refers to a community where all members are and feel respected, have a sense of belonging, and are able to participate and achieve to their potential. I think that's a really beautiful definition myself, when we talk about this on the community level and the place that we call home, and personally, I think those are great things to strive for. It utilizes assessment and engagement, so taking a look at what's going on and also engaging with the community to figure out what they're seeing. It can include a review of ordinances, policies, programs, access to resources, goals, values, other guiding principles that are important to the community. If we talk about it within various sectors and talk about the business community, it could have to do with the business goals or hiring practices or things like that. If we talk about school, maybe it's access to different programs or extracurriculars, and so there's all different levels that we can take a look at. And what we've really been talking about too is we want to enhance what's already in place and build on progress. It's an enhancement to the system and an improvement. It's meant to better the community, not necessarily to just throw everything out and start over, but it's really an enhancement that we're looking at. Who will help us build a community inclusion action plan? One is the community. When I approached Commission President Dartis on this, I mentioned that I really felt like this needed to be something where we're looking at all aspects of the community and that we're not just focused on the city of West Fargo and what we're doing, but when you look at that definition of inclusion, think of all the different touch points that you experience as you go about your day in the city that some have nothing to do with the government. And so we want to look at the entire community. We want to look at a core group of sector advisors, and this is not an exhaustive list, but when we look at it, we think about government, education, business, the faith community, nonprofit, social services. So we want to find people who are willing to step up and kind of represent those sectors and help us evaluate from there. And the final person, and she's here tonight, I'd love to call her up to provide some more information on her experience, is Letizia Hellerud. She is a West Fargo resident, and she happens to have a consulting business that specializes in intercultural competency and helping do these evaluations. So I'd love to invite Letizia up so she can share a little bit more about her experiences, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you, President. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Letizia Hellerud, and as Melissa said, I'm a resident of West Fargo. I've been living in West Fargo for the past 6 years. My son is a Packer and a Bison. My daughter is a Mustang, and I've been part of the West Fargo School District for the past 13 years. I'm a native of Burundi, which is in Eastern Africa, and I grew up in Burundi, in France, in Rwanda, and in Burkina Faso, West Africa. So I've visited or traveled in over 40 countries in 4 continents, and I came to the U.S. as a refugee 22 years ago, and I have lived in West Fargo, Moorhead, all those 22 years. I serve on several boards, including the Fargo Moorhead Symphony Orchestra, and the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition, but I also serve at other regional boards as well as one national board. In terms of my education, I have a BA in English, Literature and Linguistics from the University of Burundi, and I also have a master's in management from the University of Mary. I do have a couple of certifications that one of them includes a tool that we will be proposing as we move forward with this project, the IDI. Some people find it impressive that I speak 5 languages, but for me it was mostly languages that I learned out of need and also as a means to survive. In all the 4 countries where I've lived, I was actually a refugee. My employment history is I'm going to say all over the place, is almost like my life. From the night shift assembly line at Cardinal IG, a window factory in North Fargo, to upper management as the director of the New American Services through Lutheran Social Services, and that's the program that resettled my family as refugees. I headed this agency while serving as a state refugee coordinator. And in between, I did teach French at Montessori, the Academy for Children downtown, for 3 years. I also coordinated a transitional housing program in Moorhead through Lakes and Prairie Community Action Agency. I also served as a cultural liaison and family services coordinator for 10 years through SENDCA, Southeastern North Dakota Community Action Agency. So I started Ubuntu Consulting in 2015, and mostly because of the demands from the community. Different organizations would come to me and ask me to help them create better places, workplaces, or better communities where, which were more equitable and more inclusive, where everyone really could feel like they belong and that they could fully contribute, whether it was revising the policies or programs or access to those programs, or even through the diversity, like helping them diversify with or create diversity with their personnel, from recruitment to retention to promotions. So I'm very much excited about the possibility of collaborating with the city of West Fargo, my city, on this program, on this project. Some of my clients include, and this is like a variety of projects, Microsoft, the Fargo campus, the city of Fargo and other government entities in Minnesota and North Dakota, NDSU and other education entities, churches and other nonprofit secular organizations. And currently I'm working with the Eastern North Dakota Synod on cultural competency development within the church members. One of the recent projects that I worked on, and which is probably the one that caught President Dardis, was a collaboration, a multi-sector collaboration on workforce development in Northwest North Dakota and Southeast North Dakota. Northwest Minnesota, Southeast North Dakota. And this, I have the reports. It was in 2 phases. The first phase was in 2017, and the second phase was in 2019, if anyone is interested in looking at those. So I'm a firm believer of 2 things. One, everything starts with the individual. And before we can even talk about enhancing systems or organizations, we have to do some work at the individual level. And also, I'm a firm believer that everything starts with home, whether it's in our own, families, or workplaces, or churches, or our city, and so on. So I'm coming to this collaboration with 5 or 6 years of professional consulting, but I'm bringing 25 years of professional experience in this arena of inclusion, of really how can we create better integrated workplaces and communities. And of course, I'm also bringing a lifetime of experience as somebody who has always been not a member of the mainstream community. So I hope that I have some insight that can be valuable to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Heller. Any questions or comments from the commission for Mrs. Heller? Thank you very much.
I think she was being humble, but she forgot her Bush fellowship, and she'll be focusing on community engagement through that process as well. And so I think, as you can see, we have a West Fargo resident with extreme competency and expertise in this area, and what a wonderful opportunity to take a look at what we can do. So the few concrete recommendations we have for you right now to take a look at and consider for recommendations is one, providing a plan that can serve the whole community. And as we were first looking at it, and as I personally was looking at it, I was really interested in how do we assess the whole community, how do we get everyone involved, how do we provide the solutions that need to be presented. But then as I thought about it, I wasn't sure that was possible. And I think what's more possible is for us to really provide resources, tools, and directions that we can make available to the community to use to assess themselves in whatever sector that might be, if it is within their churches, if it's within their business, if it's within their neighborhood. I think that would be the best way to serve and provide a legacy through this program is to provide those resources and promote them and have them available. It's something that we've seen in other cities. Seattle has done an extensive toolkit process where they have a checklist to go through. Denver has done a lot of work on this. Dubuque, Iowa, which is a town of about 56,000, has an office devoted to this particular issue, and they have a strategic plan devoted to it as well. So it's something that various communities are starting to take up and provide it back to their communities as a benefit. So that's one recommendation, and we'd work with that core group where we've identified leaders from each sector to help build those toolkits specific to those sectors. And our hope is that those core groups would also create their own subcommittees with individuals from their sector and kind of report back to the core group. That will allow us to manage our time on that as well and really engage some very passionate people that exist in the community already looking to evaluate these things. The second piece that I think is critical is for us to provide leadership through the development of this plan, but also through our own assessment. And so Leticia had mentioned a tool that she is certified in and that she can assist us with, and that's the Intercultural Development Inventory. There's some technical language in there that you can read through, but at the individual level, the employees can take it and find out just kind of where they are in terms of their thoughts and feelings about diversity. There's no wrong category to fall in at all. It's a spectrum. And then for each category, there is tools and a plan that's developed for that employee to take on if they choose. So that helps us provide leadership for self-assessment with a neutral tool. I forgot to mention earlier, one of the reasons why we would look at a tool like this and we would look at incorporating someone like Leticia into our plan is to have that neutral assessment where we're not trying to assess ourselves, but we're having someone assist us going through that process. And building that plan with a really thorough look, and there's some things that we might not consider. The next step is you can also do that listening session at the department level to really build a good idea of what needs to happen as an organization. And that involves both working with a facilitator for employees to speak their mind and share their thoughts and feelings and comments and ideas, and improvements on this topic, but then also to flip it back to the consumers or the public to share their thoughts and feelings on those departments. So that would be 2 levels. There would be a lot of learnings as we go through this too that I believe would help facilitate the building of those resources that we would offer to the rest of the community. So it's a lot of learning and development as we go. And then the facilitator would assist us in identifying those strengths and improvement areas for us to work on. Yes, sir.
Melissa, as you're going through this, what is your plan for the funding of all this? This isn't free.
No, it's not. And that was, thank you for asking that question. One of the things we wanted to do first was get some feedback from you on these kind of philosophies, and then our next step was to offer pricing and a plan. In terms of funding, I've met with Tina and Commission President Dartis and Letizia as we walked through this. I'm not sure if Tina had a particular funding
sales tax.
No.
Stop it. Sorry, I apologize. I guess, Melissa, this looks good, but before we can give feedback, I think we have to know costs.
Sure.
Because this is employees, a lot of their time, not just maybe what she may charge, but all you folks are going to go through this or us.
Yep.
It's time, and time is money.
Absolutely, that's a fair point.
It'd be good to know.
Yes.
And I've received comments from citizens, and they want to know, we've received so much feedback that we are not an inclusive community, and should we assess that first before we even go out and employ the services of a consultant and get that group? So do we have to get to that point first to see if this is even needed? Before we spend money.
I would argue that this is something that can happen at any time, and you don't need to wait for there to be a problem before you are proactive and address it. Right. That would be my counsel on that. I have about 15 people who have volunteered to be involved in this throughout the community. This is a topic that resonates with a lot of individuals on the flip side of maybe some of that commentary that you've received. So I think if we wait for there to be an issue, it becomes something that we can't manage appropriately, where I bring this forward to you now as an opportunity to consider proactive action.
Regarding part of your question, Commissioner Olson, I've had a number of people reach out to me. Their culture would be Hispanic and Black, both, with regard to some concerns if they have, not serious problems with English language learning in the school systems. I think it needs to be enhanced. I've had some bullying issues brought forward to me with regard to some of our diverse students that we have within the school system. So nothing overwhelming, it's certainly not anything any other community's not experienced, and that type of thing. But this all is a matter of timing, as all of this is unfolded within our community. I thought it was appropriate that we at least have a discussion about that inclusion and where are we? Do a self-assessment. People seem to be concerned about the term I used, and it's all on me, about a consultant. I don't consider Mrs. Hellerud a consultant at this point in our friendship. I consider her a friend that's extremely knowledgeable in that capacity, extremely respected from everybody that's ever worked with her, because I've made some phone calls, and so and she's a homegrown resident, so to speak, over the last 21 years that she's lived in the United States. So I reached out to her. We were at a joint meeting, and I was quite honestly overwhelmed by the respect that she garnered from everybody in the room. And like I said, she's a West Fargo lady. So Mark, your concerns, Commissioner Simmons, are very, very profound, and we're all thinking the same thing, because revenues are going to be a difficult challenge this year. There's no doubt about that. But if we need to go out and get some sponsorships for some of this stuff, Count me in. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, those are all very, very good questions and comments. And because I know, I think I skipped over a page. Oh, sorry. I wanted to provide some logical benefits for you guys as well when it comes to building these things, because I thought that's helpful. Some people just think a little bit more that way. So one of the things that's a great benefit of a community inclusion action plan that really speaks to the idea, but do we have an issue, is there something we need to respond to, is that all communities across the board in the United States are changing and the population is becoming more diverse. And so it is a proactive approach to stay in step with that changing population. I have some examples in here. Most of these are rooted in business, but I think you can extrapolate them into the idea of a community and what's going on. So the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has a goal of they need to hire people, and they want to hire people intentionally so that it reflects those that they're serving, and that population they're serving is becoming more and more diverse. So they've worked on an inclusion plan to make sure that they're hiring in a way that it represents those that they're serving. Taking advantage of the talents coming into our community from a business mindset. The idea of diversity in the workplace is so important when it comes to innovation and problem solving and creative thinking. And so there's lots of again, these are all rooted in business, but I think we can look at towards them for the community too. Diverse management teams have 19% higher revenues due to innovation. There's a lot of companies out there who take on very specific corporate social responsibility strategies, whether that's a marketing thing they do or an authentic thing they do. It's become a catalyst in the business community. You saw that during the responses to the George Floyd marches, where you saw companies taking very strategic marketing tactics when it came to that. And so I think that helps us become the idea that we would even focus on that idea helps make us become an attractive community for businesses that are looking for a new place to land or invest. There's substantial research that just shows diversity brings many advantages to an organization. Again, the profitability, creativity, stronger governance, and better problem solving. And then the millennials. I always have to bring up the millennials. But by 2025, they're going to represent 75% of the workforce. And millennials believe that an organization is more innovative when it has a culture of inclusion. And there's another study that showed about 5 years ago, 26% of millennials were showing that they were purposely looking for organizations that had inclusion and equity as a standard in their values. And so these are all topics that are current. They're things that people are thinking of outside of how they think of their community. It's all around them, and I think there's a great opportunity for us to proactively align with that. So with that, the next steps is to obtain feedback from the West Fargo City Commission, and the funding is a great big component of that. And if there's other feedback, I would gladly take that at this time, or if you wanted to individually send it. Is any other feedback?
I guess I'm kind of with Brad a little bit when he said, is that even an issue in our community? Because I feel like West Fargo is pretty inclusive already, and when you talked about millennials want that culture of inclusion already, I mean, is that something we need to spend tax dollars on to get that, if that's what the people already want?
Again, I was relaying what was told to me by a citizen, so just want to clarify that.
Yes, absolutely.
Commissioner, if I may, I think at the very least, it will be important to consider an assessment, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. We may feel like everything is going well, but I think it's not a bad idea to check the pulse of the community. And whether it's internally here through this kind of assessment, whether it's through listening sessions where you invite the community to give feedback to the leaders of the city, and then decide how to move forward or if it's necessary. But I think it's important to look at this project as from a strength-based, not something that is necessarily acknowledging that something is broken, but coming from a perspective of we can always improve something, whether it's at personal level or whether it's at organizational systems, and we won't know until we look at, we dig deeper.
Mr. Mayor?
Please, Commissioner Jurdovic.
I'll just also point out, I'm not sure that a non-racially diverse commission should make a decision that we don't have a diversity problem. We're not diverse ourselves. I'm not sure we're the right audience to make that determination.
Anyone else? Comments? Commissioner Simmons.
I just, again, Melissa, I think you're kind of sidestepping my question here, but again, I want to know, how much this is what you think this is gonna cost. How many hours do you already have into it, for an example? How many hours have you put into this? Your time is money as well, and taken away from other things. And again, if this works, it's fine, but I want to know what it's gonna cost us. And can you tell me that right now? Can you tell me?
I can't, but I think I wanted to make sure that you were aware that this was something being worked on, that we could come to you with more concrete information.
Well, I'd like to know, before you keep working on it. I mean, your time is our money. The staff is our money. How much do you feel we have into this, and how much moving forward? It's too late when you get to the end of the line. Then you come and say, well, this is. I want to know before you even get going what's the cost factor, I guess. That's all.
Okay. I agree. I'm concerned about the cost as well.
Is that something you can send us out or kind of figure out, Tina and Jim or whatever, what this is, where we're at today, how much we've already spent, where we're going to go with? I know she's a good West Fargo citizen, but it does say consulting on her website. So, unless you're doing it for free, fantastic. But if that's just true, there's a lot of other issues that we have to, as a city, have to pay for as well. So I'd like to know costs before we go any further with this.
Okay. We can work to get that quickly.
Okay.
And if
it doesn't have to be exact, obviously. I just want something close to know where we're at.
Sure. Absolutely. So that when I look at the next steps, that was a portion of it, but we'll speed that up to get a rounded out estimate.
Okay.
That will be helpful and then you can provide more feedback. We were looking at a timeline of 12 to 18 months. Assessment takes a long time. And also we do have we all have a lot of pressure and a lot of other priorities on our plate. So giving us the proper amount of time to focus on it without trying to get it done as quickly as possible and take away from other priorities lengthens the time frame. And then looking at who are those partners, who are those key industry sector people that can help us along. As I was just doing some initial exploration, there's a lot of existing programs out there for communities to use in the assessment process too, that the Department of Justice has a lot of things, so we can take a look at incorporating those into to see where those existing resources are available that can help us with those costs as well. And then taking a look at those industry sectors from the core group. As I said, we already have 15 individuals who have signed up and said they want to volunteer and they want to be involved in this. So that's great, and hopefully we can find some more. But we will make the cost estimate a priority.
Okay, thank you.
As I said, that was just a presentation, no action requested, so I will sit down. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Richard. The next order of business is item number 6, is a COVID-19 recommendations from the Public Health, CDC, and West Fargo Community Events. Mrs. Fisk.
Thank you, President Dartis. My name actually isn't the one that should be after that, but because it was a consensus of the commission that you wanted to have a discussion on this topic, my name is there, and there's also representatives from Epic Events, Epic, and West Fargo Events here if you'd like to speak with them.
Is there somebody from Cass County Health here as well?
No, they are not. They only give advice. They don't make definitive recommendations. So I did not ask them to be here at this time.
I guess, is there a specific recommendation on the agenda?
It was something that I was asked to put on there so that it could be discussed.
I mean, I know I was one of the people that asked to bring this up, so I can certainly talk to it for a minute. You know, from my perspective, I know over the last few months we've kind of taken a piecemeal approach with Cruise Night, and we've canceled it now 2 months in a row. We have Westfest coming this fall. We have a street fair that was postponed due to COVID. And then kind of in addition to that, events that are starting to happen at our city-owned venues, being the POWMA Park and the lights. And I guess I certainly have, take a step back. I'll speak on behalf of all parents in this city that we all want to have schools functioning as normal as possible in 7 weeks as possible. We do not want to shut down bars and restaurants again, which we've seen happen in other states in the U.S. in just the last 2 weeks. And we want to protect our economy. So I feel like these events can create, especially the larger events, and create additional risk to those things that to me are non-negotiable. And to be blunt, a hairball concert isn't worth, to me, the risk that it could create in our community. I'm okay with smaller types of events happening, but the larger ones, being Cruise Night, Westfest, a street fair, and larger concerts are a concern that I think this commission needs to discuss.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Commissioner George?
So this one's a really big one for me because I've been really opposed to all of the COVID cancellations in the first place. I honestly come from a position of I don't think we should have forced any businesses to close. I don't think we should have forced schools to close. So I'm coming from that position. With this recent Cruise Night cancellation, the public was extremely vocal about being unhappy about this cancellation, and so I've been talking with members of the VFW on this. They're very unhappy because, we already took away their business and their revenue, earlier this year, hurting them with COVID, and now we're going to hurt their business again every time we cancel a Cruise Night, and it's going to be the same thing with the Silver Dollar and other vendors, I'm sure, that show up there. We're going to continue to hurt them financially. I know, obviously this is a real virus. I'm not arguing that point, but I also believe that, the death rate is really, really, really low. And for people that are truly at risk, I don't believe they're going to come to these events anyway. I think the numbers might be down or might be a little lower than they have been in the past. I would guess we're not going to see crowds of 8,000 to 10,000 people. But if we did, I don't think it's our right to shut it down, to say that they can't be there if they want to be there. I think, for mental health, people, really need something to look forward to, and everything's been taken away from them. And I don't agree with any of the cancellations. I think everything with Epic should go on. I think everything from West Fargo should go on, and I sure believe that schools need to happen normally this fall, no matter what. I personally almost don't even care what the COVID numbers are. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
Take my turn. I'm kind of in the middle, quite honestly. I think that as long as we meet the Cass County and the CD requirements, we're okay. But I've heard a lot, like from the VF, as far as what they're doing, and as far as the president of West Fargo Events, we're not just there to provide the VFW with an income. We're there to provide the citizens with somewhere to go. Now, I don't go, Commissioner George, as far as you do, because I will tell people right now, you see it all the time, they say they believe a theory, there's no such thing as COVID-19, people aren't getting it. I'll tell you right now, that's total bullcrap, because you're looking at one that had it. And it's not a fun thing to go through. It scared the hell out of me. And it scared me so bad, to be honest with you, it took 3 hours to get me a will, because I knew I was going in, and I didn't know I was coming out. So I was very scared, and Chief, you know what it's like. You guys go there all the time. So don't give me the crap that you folks don't think there's one. There is one. Getting back, I do believe, though, that the small events are fine. I think as long as we fall within the guidelines of what the Cass County and the CDC say. For an example, I know the capacity at downtown is 400. 75%, we have 300. So anything we can do under 300, I'm okay with that. Out at the plaza, capacity is 4,000. We can have 3,000. Now, yes, that's a little high. I want to make sure that that's separated. But if that's what the Cass County Health says, you know, and as long as we can control it. The problem with cruise night, Commissioner Georgia, we could not control that. There are 3,000 to 5,000 people down there. We could not control that. So I agree with that one.
I'm not sure general admission concerts can be controlled either, because the state requirement says events more than 500, they must maintain a social. You must be able to maintain a social distance of 6 feet. No way you're putting 2,000 people even in there for a concert where people are going to be drinking and wanting to stand closer to the stage, and you're not going to see that happen. I mean, that's where my concern is the larger events as well, because I think we all want to protect the same thing. At the end of the day, it's it's whether or not
how do we control
how to do it.
You just can't control it, like Eric said. Even, you know, cruise night, I understand they're coming and going. Even in a ticketed event, unless you have grid lines out there and somebody policing it, that they stay within their grids to keep the social distancing, you can't control how they congregate. And it's easy to do. It's human nature to go up there. And in this time, even though we've, as a commission, we went into an agreement with West Fargo Events to manage these things, nobody ever saw a pandemic coming down the pipe. So to me, all of these should have been brought before the commission before they were ever announced that they were coming in, so we could make the say on our public property. If there's a private venue, I had no problem with them deciding to do that. If this was done in Shields Arena, where they had the control over it, for example, we couldn't do it. But it's on our public, we have to bear that responsibility to keep the public healthy, is where I stand.
I agree with you as far as I think the commission should be the final authority on whether these things happen or not. I know I'm probably in the minority because I'm pretty far extreme on this one, but regardless of how things go, I think the commission should make the decision.
I guess I will agree with that, Mayor, as well. However, I will still say that, you know, when we started this process in February, we said we were going to go by the CDC in the Cass County. We've continued to do that. And it just seems like what I'm hearing tonight is that we want to switch that process and we want to start a new ballgame.
I don't think so at all. I mean, I was on the state of North Dakota website earlier this week, and actually it was the end of last week, to be technically correct. And they point you directly out to a site, and it talks about events of greater than 500, you must be able to maintain social distance. And my argument is you can't do that at cruise night. You certainly can't do that at the West Fest Parade or a street fair, and you can't do that at a rock concert or any kind of general admission concert where you don't even control where people are sitting.
Unless you limit the people that can go, right? Say for an example, they've never used 4,000 people out there, and that's what it can hold. Never even 3, maybe 1,200. I mean,
I don't know when the last concert you went to was. For me, it was a Guns N' Roses concert, Arrowhead Stadium, front row seats, because that's the premium place to sit or to be.
Charlie Daniels.
So if you have an open venue, everybody's going to want to be closer to the stage, and that's going to make it an impossibility to maintain social distance, in my opinion.
Mayor, can I ask someone to come up and just...
Certainly, Commissioner Simmons, please.
Mike, could you come up and explain, I guess, and again, this isn't don't be pro or con, just give us, I know you're going to have to be, but try to give us an example of how we could have a concert out there and stay within the guidelines.
It was brought up about a grid system. We have been doing that for all of our events. For the most part here, the only thing that we haven't done that with is like vendor shows because we spaced them so far apart anyway. For our 4th of July firework show, we had 100 grid spaces out on the plaza. We did not fill them all. We did have reservations on all of them, but some people opt to not show up, and so then we gained additional spacing that way. You're correct that we cannot 100% control what crowds of people do, but I will just say that people have been very receptive and respectful of the grid system that we have made, and utilizing the hand sanitizer stations and the abiding by the signage that we have put forward for people as well.
The grid system is not part of the plan for the larger events that are scheduled currently, August, correct?
It certainly can be. What we were going to do is space chairs according to a plan that we put together with Fargo Cass Public Health, and then I ran it by the fire department as well. And that was a verbal conversation. There's no form to the fire department. But we had talked about egress spacing and what that should look like with not ganging chairs, because typically we have to gang them together. And we had gotten the okay to not gang them, but group them into small groups of people that would come together to the show, or they'd be spaced 6 feet apart after that.
Commissioner Simmons.
I guess, Chief, are you comfortable with what Mike is saying? Just so, we get...
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. I am comfortable with what Mike's saying as far as the grid. Our main concern for the fire department was maintaining an egress path so that we're not blocking people in case there is an actual emergency in that area. They're able to get out.
Okay. And how about our chief back there, police?
Can we first clarify what Mike is saying?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, because are you saying that there is specific seating at these concerts?
We had talked with the promoter about doing 500 seats up towards the front, and when they're referring to general admission, they're not going to sit there and stamp a ticket and assign you a seat. You would go as far forward as you're comfortable with, and then all the standing room in the world in the back. Only 500 would actually be seated.
And so could I have, if I bought a ticket and I did not want to sit, I go sit in one of those seats. No one's going to be within 6 feet of me.
Your family member or your group of people that you come in with, you would be able to sit together there, but when it comes to how we're going to space the chairs, they're going to be like a 2 chairs together, 6 foot space, 3 chairs together to allow people to go to the event together, but we wouldn't be doing a big long line of chairs all ganged together.
And
like
masks required or not required? I've seen emails in the last week, unfortunately, on both of that. So,
Mr. Lance Johnson of Epic.
I'll just really quick go through the recommendations that we had, or the discussions we had with Mike about renting the space. What we'd like to put in place would be offer masks at entry points, take temperatures at entry points, give hand sanitizer to each attendee at entrance points, have additional hand sanitizer stations, portable restroom attendants, controlled lines for restrooms, general admission area split in 2 sections, a mask encouraged section and a mask required section. We also look to give refunds given to those who are not comfortable with the crowd size if they come to the show. And we've also asked to change the venue size from 4,000 down to 1,800. And for a lot of these shows, that is our break-even point. But again, it's your facility, and we're just trying to rent it and put on a show.
So one question,
Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Jurdovic.
One question on the mask encouraged section versus the mask required section. It seems to me like we are creating an incentive system to not wear a mask, because the mask encouraged section is the 2/3 of the plaza, the closest to the stage. So if a person wants to try to take a safe approach to this and wear a mask, I'm literally being put in the back of the house, according to the map in the packet. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes, you can say that's correct. I also think it's correct that people want to come out.
I don't disagree with that.
I can go to the grocery store and not wear a mask right now. I can do that.
Yep.
I can go to a bar or restaurants, and I don't want to see those closed down either. I think this is a choice that we're trying to give citizens, and I understand your duty and appreciate it. But.
And I think that's where, I think government's role to some degree has a slight responsibility to try to protect our residents, and sometimes we protect them from themselves. That's why we have seatbelt laws. That's why we have all kinds of laws and city ordinances. So
that I couldn't disagree with more. I don't think it's the government role to protect the people's health. I think that's on them, and that's their choice.
And so doing that, they're protecting other people's health too. It's why you can't drink and drive.
If people are scared, they shouldn't go out. Agreed. Drinking and driving, that's a completely different issue. Like, it's obviously
well,
not
but,
bad.
but that's just a different version of the same thing. We are, we define rules all the time designed to protect society.
And I understand where you're coming from, but I just think when it comes to your health, you need to take responsibility. And if you are at risk or a family member is at risk, then it's your responsibility not to go out, not the rest of the public.
Commissioner Olson. So in a restaurant setting now, what is the largest group that can be seated together? Is it like 10? Or is it less than that? Like 10? So is that going to be the minimum, the maximum that you could have in a group? Is 10 people? What if there's 15 and like if I bought 15 tickets and I have my family, we all want to be in the same area. Is that going to be allowed? Because I can't do that in a restaurant. They'd split me up.
I guess that particular question had not been asked to me, but we will be
prepared.
doing whatever this commission would require us to. And if that means no more than groups of 10 in a pod that would come together, then that'll be the rule.
We can't hold them at a different standard than what our restaurants can, because it's a tough question.
My turn. As an elected official, we have an additional responsibility, and that's in the last week's discussion that took place, is that when we have these type of events, we place the men and women, the employees of the city of West Fargo, at potential risk. Our firefighters, whether it's the EMTs on their bikes, or how we do help with crowd control, as well as our police department and our police explorers. At the last wonderful cruise night, I think we had 22 explorers there, Jerry? Something like that? I shook hands with every one of these young people. That was a year ago. So when we have professionals, a chief of police, and a chief of our fire department, and we consult with the EDC. Mrs. Fisk and I, we meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with Desi Fleming from the Fargo Cass Public Health. We get an update from her 3 times a week. And then I serve on the Red River Task Force as well. And we meet once a week, and that's with state officials from the CDC, state officials from the National Guard. So to all of the public, to everybody in this room, and to my fellow commissioners, if our fire department, because of what their call ratios have been and what the types of things that they've been, and our police department of what they've been witnessing in interdepartmental type communications that they all have, with all due respect to everybody up here, I'm not going to vote to put our employees at risk. Because guys like Mark that ended up having the COVID virus, he needs that fire department guy to respond to him when he's in trouble. And all the rest of our public do. So with all due respect, Mrs. George, I understand. Believe me, I am a individual rights type of guy. But when we are elected to represent the city of West Fargo, I cannot consciously, if that man or that man there tells me that their people feel at risk with this pandemic crisis that we have going on, I'm going to give pause to it each and every time. And I fully understand the financial elements of what all of these Main Street businesses are doing, are struggling with. I respect that. But I can't put men and women at risk that work for the city of West Fargo.
And Mayor, that is exactly why I asked the fire chief the question, if he was comfortable. And now I'd like to ask the police chief how he feels. If you remember the question.
Commissioner President, Commissioner Simmons, I don't remember the question. What was the question?
I'm sorry, it was just in reference to having these concerts. I asked the fire chief if he felt it was comfortable at the level that West Fargo Events is going to do them out there with the guidelines they're taking. Are you comfortable with what they're doing?
It's a little different for us because they provide their own security for for those concerts. So, you know, for us looking at cruise night, that's different because that's our officers that are out there. So it's a little different scenario for me. If we were to respond though to a large scale event that would happen there, some sort of disturbance or something, I do have concerns, and that's the same concerns that we had for cruise night. It's not about anybody being afraid of catching COVID or anything like that. It's we deal with somebody downtown, and now we go to another call and we transmit that unknowingly to another person in our community, and something happens to that person. That's the concern our officers have. It's not about themselves. They're not concerned about that. They're concerned about what they're going to do in the rest of the community, who they're going to have contact with later.
That would probably be at any bar you go to too, though, now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I get it. I understand. Thanks.
Chief Fuller.
Just to go ahead and back up what Jerry had just said, our firefighters being in that situation of cruise night, separate from down at the lights, and again with the ingress and egress issues, we worked on those. We're fine with that. As far as if they're within CDC guidelines, Commissioner Drudevig, if they're within it, then they're within it. It's going to be extremely difficult to do that down at cruise night. I did run some numbers. So, I mean, just to cover, we've had no firefighters be sick this entire pandemic, and we've been wearing masks in the public since the middle of March, second week in March. So we've been really working hard to make sure that we're keeping this out of our fire stations. If we have one full-time firefighter go down at a good outset, it's 14 days before they can come back to work. That's just about $4,000 in overtime for one firefighter. If that firefighter gets another firefighter sick, which we've seen in other local fire departments, given our close working conditions, one gets sick, the whole shift gets sick. If at least one other person from that shift gets sick and transfers it to another shift, and we have two shifts go down, we only conceivably need 4 firefighters to be sick to take down half of our fire department, and that's 18 people that cannot go to fire calls. Not to mention the cost. I mean, you're looking upwards of $15,000 if everyone can come back to work in 2 weeks in overtime just for that. The other issue here is we have on-call firefighters who, right now, if they were to get diagnosed with COVID-19, it's assumed that they're going to get it at work. If they can show that they've been at work and they've come in contact with a patient that is diagnosed with COVID-19, it's a workforce safety issue for the state. So their medical treatment will probably be covered. Their lost wages from their full-time job is not going to be covered. So there's 2 halves to this whole thing, but neither one of them really play out well for either our fire department bottom line, the health of our firefighters, and the health of their families. So that's a great concern that we have. Not to mention, it'd be really difficult to go backwards on the mask recommendation at cruise night because it's 90 degrees and they're on mountain bikes and wearing an N95 mask. We would have to do some safety measures there, or just have them be close but not even be involved.
One more question, I promise.
Commissioner Simmons.
One more question, I promise. So, that we're on cruise night, I've talked to a few people out there, and I'd mentioned, I know to Melissa, the fairgrounds. Are they big enough to do a cruise night out there? Could there be enough room, acreage to split the cars up and, you know, rather than have it next month, say, on Cheyenne Street? If we couldn't, which probably can't, but I mean, is there enough room out there, do you think?
Spatially, I would assume there'd be enough room out there.
Yeah, because I know Cody had mentioned that he was willing to do it if we can't have it downtown.
That's also that's the West Fargo Rural Fire Department's jurisdiction and would fall into their purview for emergency medical services.
Outside of city limits too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious.
Just for everybody's information, I've been asked to a meeting this week with regard to Big Iron, the county health department, along with Cody. They've asked me to just sit in on it and participate in the discussion about Big Iron coming up. Just so you all know that. This is not an actionable item. There were multiple commissioners that voiced a concern about this after what happened with the cancellation of July's cruise night. Mrs. George is correct. social media has kind of eaten us alive, so to speak, with regard to that decision. And it's a very difficult decision. When we have venues where we can control the access points, for example, the plaza or the lights, that's one thing. Cheyenne Street, there's about 4,700 access points where the people come in after they park their cars. So there's no idea how many's going to show up, and I think you've been interesting that your estimates of what some of the populations have been of 4,000 to 6,000. I think I've seen a lot more than 4,000 to 6,000 at a cruise night.
Well, yeah, probably.
Well over 10,000, as a matter of fact. So it's a very big concern. And again, Commissioner Jurdevig's point, one of the most important things that we have to consider is to continue to keep at the forefront is the importance of getting the kids back into their schools this fall. That ought to be one of the underlying factors of any of the decisions that we make, that nothing would compromise that potential opportunity with a reinfection and growth in this. So thank you all for your comments. We'll move on to item number 7. Excuse me. Excuse me. I have a cold.
I didn't want to lose the idea that I'd heard multiple commissioners mention that perhaps they'd like to take, at least for the City of West Fargo events, the decision-making out of the staff's hands and make that decision yourselves. And so if that is something that could be discussed and decided, it would certainly help me have clarity as I go back to looking at what I need to do for the rest of the summer. So I don't know if it's an action item or what, but
that's exactly where I'd be at. I mean, I'd like to make a motion that cruise night, Westfest, and Street Fair, the ultimate decisions to cancel or not would be in the hands of the commission.
If we don't have an agenda item, can we do that? Okay. That being the case, I will allow it, being that one of the commissioners feels strongly enough about making a motion. There is a motion on the table that the decisions of any closures within the City of West Fargo be made by the City Commission. Is there a second?
Commissioner George, does that refer to all West Fargo events, all platforms, or what do you say?
Anything that the city staff would be in charge of, so that the final decision wouldn't be in the hands of the staff, it would be in the hands of the commission. It wouldn't necessarily be West Fargo events, because that's a separate entity, so it would just be anything where the city staff.
So it would be cruise night, it would be Westfest, it would be the street fair. It's pretty...
and Taste of West Fargo.
And a Taste of West Fargo.
Which is a very small event.
Yeah.
But it involves food and...
Thank you for the clarification. I must ask for a second again. Motion dies due to the lack of a second. Are there any other discussion that wants to take place on item number 6? Hearing none, we're moving on to item number 7. A petition for improvements requesting city infrastructure to serve Westview 4th Edition. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dartis, members of the Commission. Give me a moment here. On your packet tonight is a petition that we received from a developer to install city improvements, city infrastructure into a proposed development, as of now referred to as the Westview 4th Edition. The preliminary plat was before the Planning and Zoning Commission back in May. This is a pretty standard petition. It's what is required when a developer is asking the city to extend infrastructure and finance those improvements with a special assessment district. And so tonight what I am asking the Commission is to direct staff to evaluate the infrastructure needs for this development and then start working on a preliminary improvement district. And one thing that I didn't write in this agenda item, but should be a part of this process, is to also then
include it into our capital improvement plan. Again, it would be a very small development project financed with special assessments and has been petitioned by the developer, Mike Graham. I guess with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Are there any questions of Mr. Scott?
So just to clarify what you already said, this is a developer looking to get special assessments for green space development, correct? Yeah.
That's correct, Commissioner George, yes.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Scott? It's your pleasure.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the request for a petition of improvements requesting city infrastructure to service Westview 4th Edition. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Excuse me. I think we'd better move. I have a cold. Okay. Item number 8, construction report.
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dartis, members of the Commission. Not a lot to report on with construction activities again. It's been, again, as we've talked in previous meetings, it's a relatively slow summer when it comes to big improvement projects affecting the public. I do want to hit on a few items, one being that I sent an email out to the Commission earlier this morning regarding the river gates being closed on Friday afternoon. That has put the diversion into operation, and this is due to high flows coming through the Cheyenne River system, in part due to the rainfall events that we've had. I know Devil's Lake has also been discharging significant volumes of water, so all of that is causing the flows to exceed what we would consider to be our trigger points for shutting the gates. We anticipate sustained flows over 1,000 CFS for some period of time here. What we don't know is how long we will have to have the diversion in operation, and as soon as we can put a ballpark on that, we will certainly let the Commission know. As far as construction, we have a couple road closures, one being at 32nd Avenue, 9th Street West, relating to a water main project, and there's been some public works activities that have required some mild closures. Significant closure that was published last week over on 1st and 5th in the core area due to some pavement buckling. There's also been some light activity with the private development side where, again, some traffic lanes have been closed. But other than that, not really a lot of construction activity to report on. Again, with that, I'll turn it over.
Questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you, Mr. Scott. City Administrator's Report, Mrs. Fisk.
Evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I don't have that many things, I just have a bad memory right now. So, just a reminder for all of you, on July 14th at 5 p.m. will be the ribbon cutting for the Plaza at the Lights. And we are very excited. They have social distancing guidelines set up, will be in place. The event will have speakers, food trucks, live music, tours of the area, so on and so forth. But Melissa and her staff have worked very hard to create a beautiful ribbon and get the appropriate size scissors for the event. So it should be very, very nice. The liquor ordinance that we have in place sets up our liquor control board, and one of the positions on there is for code enforcement. And a while back, our code enforcement officer used to be Pierre Friedman. Well, he is our emergency manager, and Travis Johnson is currently our code enforcement individual. So I just wanted to let you know that we'll be transitioning Travis Johnson into the liquor control board as he is the appropriate member. We have people listed by title, not by name, so that it doesn't take a whole bunch of commission time to deal with it, but I just want to kind of give you the heads up. I also want to just comment, we've had 2 testing events for staff. Outside of the police department, fire, and public works, they're doing their own testing and their serology testing. The events have gone really good. First round, no positive cases. Second round was, it wasn't required. And so the individuals got their calls back. I haven't heard of anybody that got a positive. I know I'm negative because they called me. So, but anyway, staff has been doing a fantastic job of keeping each other safe and taking care of things and making sure that the public is being served. So I just want to put that out there that everyone's doing a really good job. So, do you have any questions for me?
Questions for Mr. Smith? Thank you.
One last thing, I want to welcome Emily. I'm going to butcher your last name, Hegmeister? Yes. She is the new executive assistant, so when you need help, those of you that did not know that, she is our lady, and she will be taking over where Courtney left off and where Carolyn has been assisting. So, thank you.
Thank you. The next order of business is to close the regular agenda, and the West Fargo City Commission will go into a closed executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19-1 with City Attorney John Shockley. Mr. Shockley, are we going to the West Fargo room, or are we going to ask the public to leave here? All right, very good. We stand adjourned. I'm fine if I don't talk. It tickles my throat.